Hi guys, in this video we are going to go through the 103 quiz, which is all about solving two-step equations and inequalities. So if you haven't taken the quiz yet, or maybe you're watching this before you retake it, this is a great way to study. So make sure you have your notes nearby so you can follow along with me. First, let's talk about equations. Whether it's an equation or an inequality, our entire purpose, our goal is to solve for our variable. We're trying to figure out what value, what number does this variable need to be in order for this equation to be true. The first thing I like to do is I like to draw a line straight through my equal sign because that helps me separate my two sides. It allows my brain to say, okay, I either need to focus on the left or the right. And where we focus is your variable. Because if our goal is to get the x by itself, that means we got to get everything else over to the other side. So we got to get rid of this 3. We got to get rid of the 12. What we need to do first is anything that is being added or subtracted to your variable. That has got to go first. In this case, we have a 12 that is being added. The way we get rid of that 12, the way we move it to the other side of the equation, is by doing the inverse, so the opposite. Currently, we have a plus 12. What would be the opposite of adding 12? Subtracting. We are going to subtract 12. Now, we have to do that to both sides because it is an equation, which means both sides are equal. So in order to keep it balanced, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So 12 minus 12 is 0. We did the opposite, so it zeroes out. And we are just left with that 3x. We're going to bring it down. And then over here on the right, we are going to take 30 and subtract that from 12. Whenever you have steps like this, always try to do it either in your head or on paper first, because you won't always have access to a calculator. And 30 minus 12 is 18. We have one final step, and that step is we got to get rid of our 3. Now, this part may be a little tricky. You might be like, Mrs. Ilstock, I don't know what's going on with the 3 and the x. I don't see a plus sign or a minus sign. I don't see anything going on. Well, this means 3 times x. Now that we are getting into higher levels of math, you're going to see that multiplication can be written several ways. And one of the ways multiplication can be written is just like this, when you have a number and a variable side by side. So that means 3 times x. Let's keep with our theme of doing the opposite. That's how we undo things. What is the inverse? What is the opposite of multiplication? Division. We are going to divide both sides by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. And if we're just left with one of them, that means we have just one single x, which is what we wanted. And then what would be 18 divided by 3? 6. So x is equal to 6. That is our answer. So when x is equal to 6, that makes this equation true. All right, let's try another example. Here we want to solve for y. In a problem like this, you can solve it 2 different ways. All right. We have 2 options because of these parentheses. These parentheses, they kind of throw a little wrench into things. They're like a little loophole. They're saying, ooh, you got to get rid of these grouping symbols. You got to get rid of these parentheses first before you can do anything else. Option 1 would be to distribute. So remember, we learned that a little while back that you can use the distributive property here to multiply 4 by everything inside the parentheses. That's one option. So if you would like to do it that way, go for it. I'm going to show you a different way because it's a little bit newer, and that is to just continue with our theme of doing the opposite. So the distributive property is all about multiplication because what this shows is those parentheses tell us it is 4 times the parentheses. What's the opposite of multiplication? Division. So option 2, which is what we're going to go for here, is we can get rid of those parentheses by doing inverses. So this represents multiplication. We're going to get rid of that group by dividing. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, and we're just left with y minus 2. And then what would be 24 divided by 4? 6. Okay, we are almost done here. I'm going to draw that line so I can focus in on my variable. So the variable is what we're trying to get by itself, which means that minus 2 has got to go. We get rid of it. We move it to the other side by doing the opposite. What is the opposite of subtracting 2? Adding 2. We are going to add 2 to both sides. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0, and we're just left with y. 6 plus 2 is 8. We are all done because our y is by itself, and we know in this case, the variable y represents the number 8. All right, the rest of our time is going to be spent on inequalities. So even though an inequality means something different, because an inequality means we have a whole bunch of numbers that could make this a true statement, where with an equation, it can only be equal to one number. So the meaning of them is different, but the way we go about solving them is very, very similar, okay? So we just have to be careful that we make sure that we remember it's an inequality, so we use that inequality symbol instead of an equal sign. So 5x minus 13 is less than 7. I'm going to draw that line through my inequality sign and focus in on the x. I want to get the x by itself. What should I do first? Should I get rid of the 5 or the 13? We want to get rid of the 13 first because anything that's being added or subtracted needs to be moved away first. The only exception is if we have parentheses. We got a little grouping symbol to deal with, but I don't have any here. So we want to get rid of that minus 13. What's the opposite of subtracting 13? Adding 13. We are going to add 13 to both sides. Negative 13 plus 13 is 0. We're left with 5x is less than 7 plus 3, 10. One final step. What do we need to do to get x by itself? Divide by 5, because that right there is 5 times x. And the opposite of timesing is dividing. Divide both sides by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So we're just left with x is less than 10 divided by 5 is 2. And that's our answer. So in order to make this a true statement, your value for x can be any number less than 2, and it will work. We got 2 more problems that we're going to work through together. All right, this problem, negative 2y is less than or equal to negative 18. This problem is an example of the one difference when it comes to solving inequalities. And that difference is if you multiply or divide by a negative number, then you have to flip your inequality symbol because that negative switches things around. So to make sure you're staying with a true statement, your inequality sign has to switch too. So for this one, we want to get y by itself. This is negative 2 times y. The inverse of negative 2 times y would be dividing by negative 2. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1, and we're left with y. Because I divided by a negative number, I have to flip my inequality sign. It now becomes greater than or equal to. And negative 18 divided by negative 2, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. We are left with y can be any number greater than or equal to 9. Okay, So that right there is the only difference when it comes to solving. If you multiply or divide by a negative, you must flip the inequality sign to keep it a true statement. Get to our final problem. Sometimes you will get equations or inequalities with decimals for numbers. That's okay. We are going to solve them the exact same. We just may need to do our work off to the side. It might not be as easy to do in your head. Z plus 2 4/10 is greater than or equal to 6 4/10. Focus in, our entire goal is to get that Z by itself. That means we got to get rid of this 2 4/10. How would we do that? Hopefully you just thought to yourself, subtract, because we're currently adding, and the opposite of adding is subtracting. 2 4/10 is going to be subtracted from both sides. 2 4/10 minus 2 4/10 is 0. We're just left with Z. And then over here, you may need to line up and do the subtraction here. So 4 minus 4 is 0. You bring that decimal point straight down. 6 minus 2 is 4. So 4 0/10, which is the same thing as 4. And ooh, I just made a little mistake. Out of habit, I put an equal sign. But we have an inequality there. So just like I have to be careful, you guys do too. Always double check your work to make sure the proper sign is in your answer. Okay, if you watched this video so that way you could earn another attempt on the quiz, the code word is pears, like the fruit. So email your teacher and tell them that the code word is pears and another attempt will be opened for you. If you just watched this because you needed to review for the quiz, but you still had attempts, then good luck. Take your time, do like I did here, work out all the steps to make sure that you don't make any mistakes. Good luck.